Hello. In this lecture, number 5, we are going to learn about further ornamentations that we had done in the last class. So today, we are going to start with an ornamentation which is used in Indian classical music called as Sargam. So what is a Sargam? Sargam is an ornamentation in which actual swaras are sung. For example, when we use Sare, Gama, Padha, Nisa, instead of singing them in Akar, it is called as Sargam. Sargam is used in Lay, in Tal, to create a variety or to create a different kind of aesthetic ornamentation while singing, because most of the Khayal singing is usually done in Akar. When a Sargam is sung, then it gives a little different aesthetic dimension to singing. I will just demonstrate how a Sargam is sung. Sa re sa sa re sa re sa ra pa ma pa re sa re ra pa pa ma ma re sa sa ma ga pa ma ma re sa ni re da pa ma pa ga ma re sa sa re sa sa pa da pa pa sa re ra pa pa ma re sa are all the examples of Sargam. They could also be slower in lay or even faster than this. So there can be different types of lay which are used for singing Sargam. It could also be sa re sa 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 re sa sa ma re sa re sa. This is also an example of Sargam. Then sa ma pa ma pa ga ma re sa sa ma ga pa ma da pa pa sa ma ga pa ma da pa pa ma re sa sa ma ga pa ma da pa pa sa re da pa pa ga ma re sa is also an example of Sargam. So this becomes a very important ornamentation in presentation of Khayal, as it breaks the monotony of singing Khayal in Akar. But not all the gharanas, not all the practitioners of Khayal singing use this ornamentation. Some practitioners sing that singing Khayal is the best in Akar. So they follow singing of Khayal only in Akar, while some practitioners do use the Sargam ornamentation. So it basically refers to singing the notes instead of the words of a composition, or singing in Akar with use of various ornamentations such as Meend, Gamak, Karn, Khatka as part of a Khayal performance. And this is generally done in medium tempo or even lower than medium tempo, which is the Vilambit tempo, or even the faster tempo, as a bridge between the Alap and Tal portions. So when it is sung as a bridge portion between Alap and Tal, then usually the medium tempo is followed, so that it connects or it acts as a bridge between the Vilambit and the fast tempo. But sometimes even the fast sargams are sung, and sometimes in a few gharanas even the slow tempo sargams are also sung. Now the musical saptak is said to have evolved from the elaborate and elongated chants of Samaveda based on these basic swaras. Saregama. And Shiksha is the subject that deals with phonetics and pronunciation. So Naradiya Shiksha elaborately discusses the nature of swaras, both Vedic chants and the Saptak. So this Saptak, the use of Sargam becomes very important from a very long time, since the ancient times. Now we come to the topic of Tarana. We have discussed what is a bandish in the last class. So these are different types of bandishes that we are going to discuss now. Bandish is basically a composition in a rag which is melodically composed in tal and in lay, and it also has words in it. So a bandish is a representation of a rag. Rag is a very big phenomenon. One bandish can represent only a part of a rag, because rag is very, very massive. Even if we take one single rag like Yaman, for example, it is a very big rag, it is a very massive rag. And in one bandish, not all the aspects of Yaman can be fitted. Only one aspect or maybe one face of a rag can be represented in one particular bandish. That is why we have multiple bandishes of one rag, which depict multiple faces of one particular rag. Some bandishes are Purvanga Pradhan, some bandishes are Uttaranga Pradhan, some bandishes are Shungarik in nature, some bandishes are devotional in nature, some bandishes are very unique in terms of lay, in terms of words, in terms of what swar is the sum given on. So there are many aspects which are dealt with while composing a bandish. And because there are many facets of a rag that the different composers feel should be given importance to, different composers compose different kind of bandishes while composing a bandish. So again, there are different kind of bandishes. One bandish can be said that bandishes are of khayal. Bandishes are again within khayal we have vilambit khayal and chota khayal. Then we have tarana. We have Lakshan Geet, we have Drupad, we have Dhamar, and we have Chaturanga, we have Trivat, and we have many different types of bandishes which are used to present a rag. So first, let us come to a tarana. We'll understand what is a tarana. Many of you must have heard about tarana, because tarana is a very widely used word in music these days. So when we talk about a bandish, we say that it has words which mean something. When we come to khayal, we will discuss about what exactly are the words and what exactly is the language that is used in composing a khayal bandish. While we're discussing tarana right now, a tarana is a bandish in classical music, vocal music particularly, which consists of mere syllables or words similar to the syllables produced on drums and other instruments. So, taranas were found in ancient times in the Prabandhs. Before Drupad came, Prabandh genre used to exist, which was sung widely. So compositions consisting partly of instruments, which is known as paltas, and partly of sahitya, were also in use in the ancient times. In a tarana, what happens is the words are very similar to the words that are created on string instruments. For example, words like dirdirto, derena, di, tadare, dani, etc. All these words are used um, in Tarana, which are originally produced by the string instruments. Or there are also, so these words basically don't mean anything literally. Derena, tadare, dim, tada, they don't mean anything literally. But they create a sense of aesthetics. They create aesthetics when they're sung in lay and tal. And when they are composed in a rag, it is, they create aesthetics. So there are also another type of bandish called as trivat, which is very close to tarana. But in trivat, what happens is the bowls of drums and tal and tabla and pakhavaj are used, like dhir dhir, tirakita, dum tirakita. All these words are, all these syllables are, is the language of tabla and pakhavaj. So these words, these syllables are used in trivat. Okay, so tarana is basically the form of bandish in which the syllables which are produced on string instruments are used, which don't mean anything literally. Derena doesn't have any meaning in language, but it has a musical meaning. It can create aesthetics if sung properly in lay and tal. Similar thing with trivat. It does not mean anything. The bowls of pakhavaj and tabla don't mean anything literally according to language, but they can create aesthetics and um, uh, it can be beautiful if sung in proper lay and tal. So many historians believe that the Persian poet Amir Khusro had a contribution. He contributed in popularizing Tarana. If not, he did not actually create it, but he played a very important role in popularizing it. And the Tarana is composed of in two parts, Sthai and the Antara. Some believe that Tarana of North India is an adaptation of Tilana and Carnatic music. Tarana in Khayal music, in North Indian music, is somewhat similar to the Tilana in Carnatic music. So Tarana is again composed of two parts, which is the Sthai and the Antara, just like Khayal. We will come to that later. A Tarana is a composition which is usually sung in the same rag in Vilambit and Dhrutalay in order to create an interesting variation. Usually Taranas are sung in a very fast tempo. Why is that? We'll come to that. Tarana singers are required to have very good practice in tongue twisting syllables, because you should be able to sing something like dirdirtom, 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 dirdirtom in a very fast lay. Dim dim ta na 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 dim ta na na dim ta na dim ta na dim 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 ta na 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 dim ta na 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 na. You should be able to sing this. So this requires practice. Sometimes also one also comes across very rare taranas set to Madhyalay also. The taranas composed by Ustad Bahadur Hussain Khan, Ustad Tangras Khan and Sadhu Khan are very well known and appreciated for their superior form and structure. Now why are taranas so popular? Many people like to listen to taranas because taranas are usually sung at the end of the concert. When the Vilambit Khayal is sung, when the Madhyalay Chota Khayal is sung, and basically when presenting the rag in its true form is over, then tarana is a composition which takes the audience to a certain kind of climax. It takes one to the heights of experience in classical music, we can say, in which the tarana is not a composition in which the prime aim is to portray the uh, rag, basically, but to create climax or to create a trance with the help of syllables and lay and tal. And that is why it is usually sung in a very fast tempo. And people or audience who does not understand much of Indian classical music or cannot understand much of alapi, which is a very slow and unhurried progression of rag, do appreciate tarana many times because of its fast lay and because it is very um, um, it's a different variation, it's a faster variation to of Bandish. So that is why taranas are quite popular. We'll just listen to one tarana. This is a recording of Srimati Kishori Amonkarji, who is the greatest, one of the greatest legendary singers of Khayal music. And she has sung this tarana in Rag Hamsadhvani. So I'm just putting a recording of her and we will listen to it. So this was Tarana. You must have heard it, and uh, the syllables, if you've noticed, that are used in Tarana are Tanom Tanadirdir, Tadare Dani Tanana Derena. These were the syllables which were used. And with it, there were also tans that were used in a very fast pace. Hansadvani is an evening melody, it's an evening rag, it's a night rag actually. So the tans were also used. We saw what is a tan in the last class. So basically, if you've gathered, if you've understood what uh, Tarana is all about. It is basically a fast compositions usually sung towards the end of the concert, towards the end of the rag presentation, in which fast-paced tans are also used. Now let's come to another kind of bandish, which is a Drupad bandish. Now Drupad is an art form which was sung before Khayal was originated. We're going to come to what Khayal is also all about. But let's see what Drupad is, Drupad means. So Drupad and Dhamar are the oldest forms of Hindustani classical music, which are still in practice. It is believed that these forms have their roots in the ancient composition form called as Prabandha. In these forms, there is special emphasis on the purity of Ra. Sung to the accompaniment of Pakhavach, the Drupad form is set to talas, such as Chautal, then there is Sultal, Brahmatal. These are the tals which are usually used for Drupad, whereas the Dhamar form is set to Dhamar Tal. The subject matter of Drupad usually consists of praises of deities and patronizing kings, whereas that of Dhamar describes holy. Both of these forms flourished around the 16th century, which was known as the golden age of these forms. Now, Drupad was mainly Drupad was an art form which was supposed to be very pure in terms of rag presentation, and which was largely sung in the temples in India. Why was that? Because the compositions in Drupad were mainly written to praise the god or to praise the kings. And that time, Indian classical music was mainly existent in the courts of kings. And even before that, it was in the temples. So, because they were written in the praise of God, in the praise of kings, they used to be sung in the temples. Now, Drupad, the word Drupad or the Dhruva Pada, has its root in two Sanskrit words, Dhruva and Pada, meaning fixed and literary content, respectively. So, Dhruva means fixed, and Pada is basically the literary content. So, Dhrupada may be defined as a form that has literary verses which are fixed or which are composed to certain swaras and talas. The compositions of Drupad are generally related to the bravery, to the prestige of the gods and the praise of gods, goddesses, kings as rulers, and also musical elements like tal and nag. This form is sung to the accompaniment of Pakhavaj. So there is a different tal instrument that is used in Drupad, not the tabla, as it is known to everyone. But Pakhavaj is used with Drupad for the accompaniment. And the talas used in Drupad are Chautal, Sul, Tevra, and Brahmatal usually. So why is Pakhavaj used and not any other tal instrument? That is because Drupad was originated much before tabla came, and tabla and Drupad is also a very more serious, more deeper form of raga presentation than the khayal, and that is why for Drupad presentation there is no use of harmonium also or any string instrument for that matter. There are only tanpuras which are used and pakhavaj. So because Drupad is uses many shrutis and has very deeper means which cannot be replicated on the harmonium, because harmonium is a key instrument, it's not a string instrument. So the means that are sung by the artist are not directly, that cannot be exactly replicated on harmonium, and that is why there is no string instrument or there is no melody instrument that is used with Drupad. The tals that are used in with Drupad are also they are much deeper. The presentation of Drupad is much deeper, and that is why the sound of Pakhavaj is much deeper and much resonant than the tabla, which is used for khayal music. And that is why the required instruments and the setting of raga presentation in Drupad is slightly different than what we see in khayal. There is another form which is presented with Drupad, is called the dhamar. We will first listen to the Drupad. Please listen to this Drupad by, it is a morning Drupad by Ustad Wasafuddin Dagarji.
कोई कोई गए गो कोई को कोई कहे गो शाम के डीग गई गई डीग गई गई डीग डीग गई डीग गई याहुदे डीग और का कहे गो कोई कोई कहे गो शाम के
Okay. So this is what we heard right now was a Drupad recital by Ustad Wasifuddin Dagar. In this you can, if you have heard it carefully, you would have understood that there is a different kind of an instrument that is used for accompaniment, which is the pakhavaj for the tal, and which this was a slightly medium paced to fast paced composition that was sung, not a very slow alap that was sung in this composition. So it's a different way of presenting the rag. The rag purity is kept to the maximum in this, and it's a different composition in tal, different tals than the khaya. Then we will also discuss about the dhamar now. So dhamar is also compositional form like the Drupad, which is sung to the accompaniment of pakhavaj. Dhamar is invariably set to dhamar tal. So dhamar, the composition is sung only in tal dhamar, which is why it is called dhamar. So it is also a form, name of a form, and also a name of a tal. And the form dhamar is always set to tal dhamar. It cannot be set to any other tal. Dhamar tal is of 14 beats. The compositions of dhamar are mostly related to Holi and Leela of Radha Krishna. But as this form was developed more in the medieval period, the compositions also had the contents related to the praise and prestige of kings and rulers. So basically, Dhamar is slightly, we can say, as the lighter form of Drupad. Drupad is still a very serious form of presenting a rag, which is written more in the praise of gods and kings and rulers, and it is more about bhakti, more about devotion, more about praising, and it's a more serious form of singing. Whereas dhamar is slightly lighter than in mood, in the form also than the Drupad, and it deals with subjects like Holi, and the playfulness of the festival, and the Ras Leela of Radha Krishna, and the subtle shringar between Radha Krishna. So that is portrayed in the Rag Dhamar, in the form Dhamar. So let's come to its the history and evolution of the Drupad and Dhamar. So it is believed that Drupad evolved from the Dhruva Prabandhas. Drupad in its present form has been in use since 15th or 16th century and is still practiced. though the number of practitioners as compared to the Khayal practitioners or the semi-classical practitioners are very less, but still its ancient form had Swara, Laya and Pada. And so there are still practitioners which sing Drupad all over the country and even abroad. Its ancient form had Swara, Laya and Pada, which means melody, rhythm and literary contents. All three components of equal importance. Okay, these three components have equal importance. Swara, Laya and Pada are the literary contents. Since the literary component or the verses were entirely composed and fixed to Swara and Tala, this form was called Dhruvapada. Okay? Later, Dhruvapada went through certain changes and became more popular as a prominent form of classical music and was referred to as Dhrupad. In the 16th century, Raja Mansingh Tomar of Gwalior Gharana patronized this form. In his treatise, Man Kutuhal, he especially discussed about Dhrupad, Raja Mansingh Tomar. According to him, the literature of Dhrupad was written in Deshi, or the local language of central India. That is the Braja Bhasha. So all the Dhrupads are written in Braja Bhasha, which is a dialect of Hindi. Dhrupads are also available in Sanskrit or Hindi. The literature of Dhrupad contains praises of deities and patronizing kings, whereas the literature of Dhamar contains description of Holi or the festival of colors. The composition is divided into 4 parts, which is Sthai, Antara, Sanchari and Abhog. But some compositions are also found comprising only 2 parts, the Sthai and the Antara. Apart from Raja Mansingh Tomar, Akbar, the Emperor Akbar, Raja Akbar, also provided great patronage to Dhrupad, which is why Dhrupad sustained for a very long time. Mia Tansen, Nayak Gopal, Nayak Bakshu were some of the great Dhrupad singers of the 16th century. This period is known as the golden age of Dhrupad, when Dhrupad singing flourished in different parts of North India. There were 4 banis or styles of singing Dhrupad. They were named as Gobarhar, Khandahar, Dagar and Nauhar. So these are basically the styles of singing Dhrupad. There are different styles in which Dhrupad is sung with slight variations, just like Khayal has different gharanas, which we will talk about later. But these 4 were different styles of singing the Dhrupad. And we will continue with Dhrupad and Dhamar in the next class also.